So now we've applied externalities in a very interesting way by talking about the nature of goods, about different types of goods. So we defined private goods, public goods, club goods, and even common pool resources. Well, after all of that, so what? Why does this matter? I mean, beyond so what, I guess why exactly do these problems arise? I understand that uh, goods have a different characteristic, but why is it if the market's so efficient, why don't we just kind of fix it on the market? Why is it that we see regulation and the provision of public goods or regulation of common pool goods through government action? Well, because I like asking questions. Why did the cow not go extinct? So many other animals go extinct. We could think of the buffalo, for example, right? The buffalo did in 19th century America, or at least it went really close to being extinct. And elephants are hunted in African countries to this very day. So why is it that cows somehow didn't go extinct? Well, cows are a private good. It turns out they have a commercial value. And because it has some sort of commercial value and it's a private good, it continues to thrive. Ranches are privately owned. So ranchers work diligently to help maintain their livestock because those cows, they're a very important stream of their revenue. So they actually have an incentive to protect their ranches, to make it hospitable to cows to help them grow and thrive, and then whether they kind of use them for milk or use them for meat, there's a strong incentive to keep this private good intact, to keep this private good going strong. In contrast to cows, elephants are threatened with extinction on a daily basis. They're continuously hunted, whether it's for their horn or just for pure sport. Uh, and part of the issue is, well, they might not necessarily be a private good like cows, or are they? There was actually an interesting experiment that was done with elephant populations in different African countries. So between the 1970s and the mid 1990s, Kenya, they kind of did the normal thing and they said, hey, it's illegal to hunt these elephants. You can't poach these elephants. They banned it, they outlawed it. But in Kenya, it turns out that didn't really help the elephant population. They were still hunted, they were still harvested, they were still killed at an alarmingly high rate, and their population nearly went completely extinct. Where Zimbabwe, they did kind of the weird economist thing. So they actually assigned private property rights to elephants, meaning you could actually own an elephant, right? So you could own these elephants, and that actually had a very strong incentive for people to protect these elephants and help them live and grow and have baby elephants, even if they were hunting them. Yes, like people were actually owning these elephants to hunt them. But they also didn't just want to wipe them all out at once. They needed to let the population rebound so they can still continue with their sport of hunting, or they could use their elephants for some other need. And so in Zimbabwe, the elephant population totally rebounded, where in Kenya it still trickled down, 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 simply by just adjusting the property rights and altering the incentives of the actors involved. Well, it turns out that property rights matter. And so if there is a market failure, if we do see some sort of externality, it's usually because property rights are not well defined, or at the very least, they're not enforced. With property rights, the role of government should be to protect and enforce these property rights. They are essential because they provide the incentive to monitor and efficiently use a good or service. Now, is regulation always necessary if we have a market failure, if we have a negative externality from overuse, or if we have a positive externality from not enough provision? Do we always need this regulation? Does government have to be the one to step in? Well, it turns out no. There's a lot of entrepreneurial creativity with these market failure problems or supposed market failure problems. So one of the most famous examples is this idea of beekeeping. And so beekeepers and florists, they actually put their lands next to each other because the bees actually help harvest and pollinate the flowers appropriately, which leads to ever-growing flowers and longer-lasting flowers because the bees are, one, getting the pollen and nutrition that they need, but they're also helping with the growth and development of these flower gardens and flower orchards. And this was a private solution, and they could do this because it turns out the transaction costs are really low. There's not a big transaction cost problem. It turns out it's a low enough cost where both parties benefit by finding an appropriate exchange of setting up beekeepers and florists next to each other. One of the most famous people to find a lot of work on private solutions to market failures is Elinor Ostrom. She was actually a political scientist, but she was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics, and her work was on fisheries. And what Elinor Ostrom found was there's actually a lot of private solutions to overfishing problem with fisheries, usually through local agreements and this idea of transferable quotas, that you actually possessed a certain right to a certain amount of fish, and you could actually trade those rights. You could trade the rights, right? I can I'm only allowed to catch this many fish, but what you could actually do is pay somebody for their quota, or you can actually sell your quota if you felt that you would benefit from that exchange. And remember, if these parties exchange, that means by definition that they're moving low valued resources to their higher valued use. And what makes this so key, according to Ostrom, was we're tapping into the idea of local knowledge, individual decision making. People know the environment that they're fishing in. People know the best spots to fish. They know how the weather affects the ocean. They also know the migration patterns of fish. And so that actually makes their private solutions to these market failures much more efficient if we compare them to a public solution, usually from some third-party outside observer that doesn't possess the same knowledge. Just like with fisheries, there's been experiments with pollution permits. So you could actually buy a right to pollute. And different factories, they could actually sell those rights. If there's a factory that is worried that they're not going to be able to keep their pollution down, they can actually pay other factories who can feel like they can afford to not pollute as much. They can actually buy some pollution rights from them. And that's interesting because that also leads to a lot of innovation. That leads to better innovation by companies who are willing to sell their pollution rights away. Well, it's probably because they're wealthy enough and they have the entrepreneurial creativity to find newer, greener solutions where they don't pollute as much. And that's good. We should want those resources to be directed and used by the people who can most efficiently use them. So we might actually want more pollution by certain factories if they sell their rights away to those polluting factories. And we also want the factories that can do these green solutions to not have these pollution rights. We want them to sell them away. So it turns out property rights matter. It's the property rights problem. Often regulation isn't necessary. There's private solutions to private property rights problems. We simply need to find a way to best enforce property rights, and we need to let entrepreneurs discover creative, low-cost solutions to solve these sorts of problems. So that's public goods, and that's the so what of public goods. Hopefully, we have a better understanding of applying both positive and negative externality problems, and we have a better understanding of what types of goods for which we tend to see positive and negative externalities. But most importantly, we hopefully now know that you don't necessarily need a government regulation or a government mandated solution to solve these market failures. Private solutions, entrepreneurial creativity can also step in and get us, in many cases, a much more efficient compared to the government solution outcome.